The Apache woman only asked for one night of shelter. She never thought she'd become his wife. Rain poured down from the gray sky, drumming heavily against the thick wooden roof of a small cabin on the edge of a quiet forest. The wind howled through the trees, shaking the branches as if the storm itself wanted to enter the small dwelling. Inside, a man sat by the fire, sharpening a wooden tool with care. The cabin was modest, just a single room with rough wooden walls, a stone hearth, and a few shelves filled with necessities. Dust lay in corners, and the smell of pine smoke mixed with the faint scent of dried herbs hung in the air. It was a man of few words, living alone for many years. Life on the frontier was not easy, and he had learned to rely only on himself. He was strong, resourceful, and wary of strangers. Many travelers had passed through over the years, some with good intentions, others with none at all. Birth. Yet tonight he was content with the quiet, listening to the storm and tending to his simple tasks. Suddenly, a soft but firm knock echoed at the door. The man froze for a moment, eyes narrowing as he adjusted his grip on the tool. Knocks were rare in these parts, especially on nights when the storm raged so fiercely. Despair hesitating, he set the tool down and moved toward the door. Peering through a small window, he saw a figure standing in the rain. A woman, tall and proud, with dark hair plastered to her face by the relentless rain. Her clothes were damp and clung to her frame, but there was a sense of dignity and strength in her posture. She raised a hand in a polite gesture, her eyes meeting his. "Please," she called softly over the storm. "I only ask for shelter for one night." "I do not wish to trouble you, sir. I just need a place to stay until the storm passes." The man's brow furrowed. He had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving. But people often said one thing and meant another. But something in her voice, steady and honest, made him pause. There was no fear or deception there. Only a quiet determination. Despereau. After a moment's hesitation, he opened the door.
"One night," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind.
No longer. The woman nodded, a small, grateful smile appearing despite her wet hair and damp clothes. She stepped inside carefully, shaking off the worst of the rain before moving closer to the fire. The warmth of the flames contrasted sharply with the cold outside, and the man could see her shiver slightly as she drew nearer. The cabin smelled of wood smoke, herbs, and something faintly earthy. Pay. She glanced around, taking in the sparse furnishings, the rough wooden walls, and the stone hearth. "It is cozy," she said softly. "I have traveled far, and this storm, it was unexpected." The man nodded, his eyes returning to the fire. "The forest can be unpredictable," he said simply. "Few know the ways of the storm here. You were lucky to find this place tonight." Breaths. The woman lowered herself onto a simple chair, her movements careful and measured. She was not accustomed to asking for help, and yet necessity had brought her here. She was an Apache woman, traveling alone through lands that were often unwelcoming to those who wandered outside the paths of their people. Her life had taught her to be strong, independent, and cautious. Yet tonight she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. They sat in silence for a while, the storm outside creating a barrier between them and the rest of the world. The man broke the silence first. "You are far from home," he observed, bare. She nodded, tucking a strand of wet hair behind her ear. "I am," she admitted. "But I travel when I must. There are paths I cannot avoid, places I must reach. Tonight was only unfortunate timing with the storm." Right.
The man studied her quietly. She had a calmness about her, even in the face of discomfort.
She spoke with confidence and clarity, but there was a gentleness that made it hard for him to judge her too quickly. It was rare to find someone who could command attention without demanding it. "Do you travel alone often?" he asked after a pause, curious despite himself.
Yes, she replied simply.
"It is safer in some ways. I know my surroundings. I know my strengths. I cannot always trust others to understand or respect that." He nodded, respecting her honesty. Trust was earned in these lands, and he could see that she was a woman who had earned it many times over. "Then you must be skilled," he said. "Traveling alone is not for the faint-hearted." She allowed herself a small smile. "I have learned," she said quietly. "Life has a way of teaching lessons you do not expect." The fire crackled, and the sound seemed louder in the quiet cabin. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, a tentative understanding began to grow. They were two people from very different worlds, brought together by circumstance. The storm, which might have been a mere inconvenience to others, had become the catalyst for a meeting that neither had anticipated. The man busied himself with tending the fire while the woman dried her damp clothes as best as she could. There was a rhythm to their movements, a silent agreement to coexist peacefully for the night. He noticed how careful she was not to touch anything unnecessarily, how she seemed to observe rather than interfere. It was a sign of respect, and he appreciated it. As the night deepened, they exchanged small stories, careful not to reveal too much too soon. She spoke of the lands she had crossed, of the challenges of living in a world that often misunderstood her people, and of the resilience required to survive. Breath. He spoke of the frontier, the isolation, and the lessons learned from years of solitude. Each story was a thread, weaving a quiet connection between them. Occasionally she would glance at him, curious about the life he had chosen. He, in turn, found himself noticing the way she carried herself, proud, capable, and yet not without moments of vulnerability. There was a strength in her presence that both intrigued and unsettled him. Hours passed, and the storm began to show signs of weakening. The rain's intensity lessened, and the wind no longer rattled the cabin walls with the same force. Yet neither of them moved to leave the fire or the warmth it provided. They had found, in a small way, a sense of companionship, a break from the isolation that had defined their lives. Finally, the woman spoke softly, almost as if testing the waters. "Thank you for allowing me shelter," she said. "I did not wish to impose." "You did not," he replied, his voice steady. "You came at a time when it was needed. One night, as you said, tomorrow, the roads will be safer." She nodded, accepting the truth in his words. But there was a quiet moment, a pause in which both of them considered what this chance meeting had brought. For the first time in a long while, the man felt a sense of curiosity, not suspicion, not wariness, but a genuine interest in the person who had appeared at his door. As the night wore on, they settled into a calm routine. She rested near the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames, while he prepared a simple meal. They shared it quietly, appreciating the comfort of warmth, food, and the presence of another human being. Bad. Outside, the storm's fury had begun to diminish, but inside the cabin a different kind of storm, one of unspoken understanding and quiet connection, was beginning to take shape. Neither of them knew what the future held. She would leave in the morning, continuing her journey as planned. He would return to his solitude, as he always had. Yet in that night they had shared more than words or shelter. They had shared trust, respect, and the first stirrings of a bond that neither could have predicted. When sleep finally claimed them, it was with a sense of peace that had been absent for a long time. The storm had brought them together, and in its aftermath a new chapter quietly began, one neither of them could yet see, but both would carry forward in memory and perhaps, in time, in life. The morning sun struggled to pierce through the heavy clouds, casting a muted light over the forest and the small cabin where the man and the woman had spent the night. The storm had lessened, leaving the earth wet and fragrant, the leaves glistening with droplets of rain. Birds cautiously began to sing, as if testing the world after the tempest, and the distant murmur of a stream brought a gentle sense of calm. Inside the cabin, the fire had reduced to glowing embers, filling the room with warmth and a quiet glow. The man stirred, stretching his arms and rubbing the stiffness from his shoulders. He glanced over to the corner where the woman had slept. She was awake as well, sitting cross-legged and carefully brushing the damp strands of hair from her face. Her eyes met his briefly, and in that simple glance there was an unspoken acknowledgment of the night they had shared. You slept well?" he asked, his voice rough from sleep but steady. She nodded. "Better than I expected. The storm made it easier to rest, knowing there was safety here." He nodded in return, accepting her words without comment. There was an ease in their interaction that had not existed the night before. The initial wariness had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet familiarity. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable at first, but both of them sensed it. The cabin was small, but sufficient. There were shelves with a few cooking tools, a stack of firewood in the corner, and a table with simple chairs. The man moved to the table and began preparing breakfast, a simple meal of dried meat, bread, and some water from a nearby stream. The woman offered to help, and though he initially waved her off, he soon found himself appreciating her steady hands and quiet efficiency. As they worked together, conversation began to flow more easily. They spoke of the storm, of the lands they had crossed, and of the people they had known. She told stories of her life among her Apache people, of the lessons she had learned from elders, and of the strength required to survive in a world that did not always welcome her kind. He listened, genuinely interested, occasionally asking questions to better understand her perspective. In turn, he shared fragments of his own story. He spoke of the isolation he had chosen, of the long years spent learning the ways of the forest, and of the loss he had endured in the past, loss that had led him to value solitude over companionship. Yet in his stories there was no bitterness, only a quiet acceptance of the life he had built. The morning passed in this way, a slow unfolding of trust and understanding. Outside, the forest had begun to dry, and the air smelled of fresh earth and pine. The woman ventured to the window, watching as the sunlight broke through the clouds and scattered beams, illuminating the wet foliage. She drew in a deep breath, savoring the peace that had returned to the land, and for a moment she felt a sense of belonging she had rarely experienced while traveling alone. "Soon the roads will be passable again," the man said quietly, joining her at the window.
"You will be able to continue your journey?" She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I know."
And yet, she paused, struggling to find the words. "It feels strange, leaving after this night. I did not expect to feel at ease here."
He studied her face, recognizing the honesty in her words.
It was rare for her to admit vulnerability, and he respected it.
"You are welcome here," he said simply.
"Even if it is only for a short time." The woman smiled softly, a mixture of gratitude and hesitation. She had traveled through many lands, encountering both kindness and cruelty, and it was unusual to find a place where she felt neither fear nor suspicion. The cabin, the fire, and the man's steady presence offered her a rare sense of safety. As the day progressed, the storm had fully passed, leaving the forest alive with sound and color. The man suggested they take a short walk outside to assess the roads, both to ensure her safety and to enjoy the rare warmth of the sun. She agreed, gathering her belongings and stepping carefully over the damp ground. Bye. Outside, the forest was vibrant. Patches of sunlight broke through the canopy, reflecting off the leaves and creating patterns on the forest floor. Birds flitted from branch to branch, and the scent of wet earth filled the air. They walked side by side, careful of the slippery paths, and spoke in soft tones. The conversation was easy now, no longer formal or guarded, but natural and fluid. "You know the land well," she observed after a while, watching him navigate the terrain with confidence. "I have lived here for many years," he replied. "The forest teaches you its ways if you listen, Bet. You must respect it, and it will guide you." She nodded, impressed by his knowledge and the quiet confidence he carried. She had always admired those who could live in harmony with nature, who understood its rhythms and dangers. There was a wisdom in him that went beyond words, a calm presence that made her feel safe. As they walked, they encountered the remnants of the storm, a fallen branch here, a small pool of water there. He pointed out which areas were safe to cross and which to avoid, guiding her with gentle care. Bear. She appreciated his attention and began to trust not just his guidance, but his judgment and instincts. After returning to the cabin, they settled near the fire once more. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, warming the room and highlighting the dust motes dancing in the light. They spoke more freely now, sharing personal experiences and small secrets. She told him about the people she had met on her journey, the challenges she had faced, and the lessons she had learned. He spoke of his own past, the solitude he had chosen, and the quiet joys he had discovered in living close to the land. In these moments, the walls between them began to crumble. There was no rush, no pressure, only a growing awareness of each other's presence and the comfort it brought. They laughed softly at shared observations, nodded in understanding at unspoken feelings, and began to see each other not as strangers, but as companions navigating the same small world. The evening approached and the sky shifted to shades of orange and pink. The cabin glowed in the warmth of the fire, and the forest outside grew quiet once more. The woman helped prepare a simple meal, and they ate together, sharing food and conversation in a rhythm that felt natural and unforced. There was a sense of ease between them, a quiet acknowledgement that the night had changed something within each of them. As darkness fell, the man retrieved blankets for the night. The woman looked around the cabin, considering the journey she would resume in the morning. Yet she felt a reluctance to leave, a desire to remain in this safe, warm place where her presence was respected and valued. "You have done much to help me," she said softly, looking into his eyes. "I am grateful for your kindness." "You would have done the same for another," he replied simply. "It is only right to help those in need." There was a pause, filled with the quiet sounds of the night, the crackling fire, the distant rustle of leaves, the soft hum of the forest. In that silence, an understanding passed between them. They were different in many ways, from different worlds even, yet they had found common ground. Trust, respect, and a shared sense of humanity had formed a fragile yet strong connection. That night, as they settled to sleep near the fire, there was no awkwardness or tension, only a quiet companionship. They were aware of each other's presence, conscious of the bond that had begun to grow, yet neither spoke of the feelings developing within.
Words were unnecessary. Their shared experiences and mutual respect spoke volumes. The forest outside had recovered from the storm, the leaves glistening with dew and the air fresh with the scent of renewal.
Inside, the cabin held a warmth that went beyond the fire. It was a warmth born of understanding, of trust, and of the beginnings of a bond that neither had expected. Though the woman would soon resume her journey, and the man would continue his life in solitude, this day had marked the start of something deeper. But a night of shelter had transformed into a day of connection, and both knew, even if unspoken, that their meeting was not merely a chance encounter. The hours passed quietly, filled with shared tasks, gentle conversation, and the simple comfort of being in each other's presence. They had found, in each other, a sense of companionship rare in the world they inhabited, a connection that was built not on grand gestures or dramatic events, but on small acts of kindness, understanding, and respect. As the second night approached, the woman could not help but reflect on the strange turn her journey had taken. She had come seeking only shelter, expecting nothing more than a safe place to rest. Instead, she had found someone who saw her, truly saw her not as a traveler or a stranger, but as a person of strength, courage, and dignity. The man, in turn, felt an unfamiliar yet welcome warmth in his chest. He had lived a life of solitude, valuing independence and self-reliance above all else. Yet in this woman's presence he felt a connection he had not anticipated, a quiet understanding, a shared respect, and the beginnings of trust that promised something more than fleeting companionship. And so, as night fell once more over the forest and the cabin, they settled near the fire with a sense of peace. The storm had passed, but it had left behind more than just wet earth and fallen branches. It had brought two people together, two lives intersecting in a way that neither could have predicted, and the bond they had begun to form promised to shape the days ahead in ways neither yet understood. The morning after their second night together, the forest seemed alive in a different way. The storm had completely passed, and the sun shone through breaks in the trees, creating bright patches on the forest floor. Birds chirped and insects buzzed gently, and a soft breeze carried the fresh scent of wet earth. The cabin, now warm and dry, felt peaceful, almost like a small world apart from the rest of life. The man stood at the door, looking out over the surrounding trees. The woman had joined him, leaning lightly against the wooden frame, her dark hair catching the sunlight. Despair. She had grown more comfortable in his presence, her initial wariness replaced by quiet trust. But she still knew the roads ahead would be challenging, and the wilderness beyond the cabin could be unforgiving. "Today, I think it is safe enough for you to continue," he said softly, not wanting to pressure her but knowing the forest had rules that could not be ignored. She nodded but did not immediately move. "Bess, I know," she said, "but I cannot leave without preparing. I must know the paths are clear, and I must be certain of what lies ahead."
He studied her carefully.
She had traveled alone for a long time, and he recognized the careful balance of caution and courage in her eyes. "Then we will go together," he said finally. "I can guide you a short distance and make sure the paths are safe." She smiled, appreciating the offer. Not many would volunteer to guide someone else through the forest, yet he did so willingly, without judgment or expectation. She gathered her few belongings, wrapping them carefully, and together they stepped into the soft sunlight outside the cabin. The forest was quiet except for the gentle rustle of leaves underfoot. Puddles reminded them of the storm's power, but the man led the way with confidence. He moved easily over the uneven terrain, pointing out which areas were stable and which were treacherous. The woman followed, her steps careful but sure, trusting his guidance while also observing the land with her own keen eye. As they walked, conversation flowed naturally. She asked questions about the forest, about edible plants, signs of animals, and ways to read the land. He answered patiently, sharing knowledge he had accumulated over years of living close to nature. She listened intently, impressed by his skill and respect for the land. Suddenly, a sound broke the calm. A low growl echoed from the underbrush, followed by rustling. Both froze, eyes scanning the surrounding trees. It was the sound of an animal, large and possibly dangerous. The woman instinctively took a small step back, but the man remained calm, moving slightly in front of her. "Stay close," he whispered, his voice steady. "Do not make sudden movements." Through the trees, a large wolf emerged, its eyes sharp and alert. It sniffed the air, assessing them as they stood still. The man's hand hovered near a sturdy branch, ready but not threatening. He knew that showing fear or aggression could provoke the animal. Slowly, he began to step backward, signaling for the woman to do the same. The wolf followed them for a short distance, then paused, its ears flicking as if deciding whether to attack or retreat. The man held his ground, calm and measured, and after tense moments, the wolf finally turned and disappeared into the forest. The woman exhaled quietly, her pulse still racing. "I did not expect the journey to include a wolf," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips despite the lingering tension. He chuckled softly. "The forest has its own rules," he said. "You must respect it and remain calm. Hey. Fear will only make it worse." She nodded, taking his words to heart. The encounter had been frightening, but it also demonstrated his skill and calmness. She realized that relying on him did not make her weak. It was a choice that increased her chances of safety and survival. They continued their walk, encountering smaller challenges along the way. Slippery slopes, tangled roots, and the occasional loose rock. Each time the man guided her, offering advice and assistance without being overbearing. But she began to notice not just his skill, but his patience, his attentiveness, and the quiet strength that made her feel safe. As the day progressed, they reached a clearing near a small stream. The water sparkled in the sunlight, clear and cool, and the sound of it flowing over rocks brought a sense of calm after the tension of the morning. They paused to rest, sitting on a fallen log at the water's edge. "You handled that well," he said, nodding toward her. "The wolf could have been dangerous, but you stayed calm." She looked at him, considering his words.
"I learned from watching you," she admitted. "You were not afraid."
That gave me the courage to stay steady.
He studied her, recognizing the honesty and humility in her voice. "Strength comes in many forms," he said quietly.
"It is not always about fighting or running. Sometimes it is knowing when to stay calm and act with care," she smiled, feeling a connection growing stronger between them. This day, which had begun with a journey through uncertain terrain, had become a test, not just of survival, but of trust, patience, and understanding. They had learned to rely on each other, to read the land together, and to respect the quiet but powerful strengths each possessed. After resting, they began the journey back toward the cabin. The woman moved with more confidence now, her steps sure, her senses alert. But she had begun to trust not just his guidance, but herself, and the lessons of the forest were sinking in. The man noticed the change in her demeanor, a quiet pride in her movements and the way she carried herself. As they returned to the cabin, a small herd of deer crossed their path, alert and cautious. The man motioned for her to stay low and move quietly, and together they watched the deer pass without disturbing them. The woman marveled at the beauty of the animals and the harmony of the forest. She realized that surviving in this land was not only about avoiding danger, it was about observing, understanding, and respecting life in all its forms. Back at the cabin, the day began to wind down. They tended to the fire, prepared a simple meal, and shared quiet conversation. The woman reflected on the day's events, the storm's aftermath, the wolf encounter, and the small triumphs along the forest paths. She realized how much she had learned from the man, not just about survival, but about patience, observation, and the quiet power of steady courage. The man, in turn, reflected on her presence. He had lived alone for many years, valuing solitude above companionship, yet he found himself appreciating her strength, her courage, and the way she observed the world with care and intelligence. She was no ordinary traveler. She was a woman of insight, skill, and quiet determination, and he found himself respecting her more with each passing moment. As the evening approached, the cabin glowed in the warmth of the fire. Outside, the forest was calm, the remnants of the storm fading into memory. They shared a simple meal, speaking softly, laughing quietly at small observations, and growing more comfortable in each other's presence. Bond. The bond that had begun with a single night of shelter was now strengthened through shared experiences, mutual respect, and the quiet acknowledgement of each other's abilities. Night fell, and the forest outside became dark and quiet. The woman prepared her small sleeping area while the man attended to the fire, ensuring it would last through the night. There was no awkwardness, only a sense of calm companionship. Both had faced challenges during the day, and both had come to rely on the other in small but meaningful ways. Before sleep claimed them, the woman spoke softly. "I did not expect my journey to include danger like today," she said, her voice reflective. "Yet I feel stronger having faced it with you."
He nodded, understanding her sentiment.
"And I feel the same," he said quietly. "The forest tests us, and today we tested ourselves together." Breath. "That is a rare thing." They settled near the fire, letting the warmth and light carry them into sleep. The day had been a test of courage, trust, and skill, and both had passed, not only surviving the challenges but learning from them, growing stronger and closer in the process. The forest, now calm under the moonlight, seemed to watch over them. The events of the day had forged a bond that was more than convenience or circumstance. It was a connection built on respect, understanding, and shared experience, a bond that would influence the days to come, shaping the choices, trust, and feelings between them. As they drifted into sleep, each felt a quiet sense of gratitude. The wolf, the forest paths, and the small challenges had not only tested them, but had brought them closer together. The journey had become more than just survival. It had become a shared adventure, one that would leave a lasting impression on both of their lives. And though neither spoke of it aloud, both understood that the events of this day had changed the nature of their relationship. They were no longer simply a man and a woman sharing a cabin. They were companions, learning to trust, support, and rely on one another in a world that often demanded independence and caution. The days after the storm passed brought a sense of calm and routine to the cabin. The sun rose early, casting golden light across the forest, and the sounds of birds and insects filled the air. The man and the woman had settled into an easy rhythm, sharing chores, meals, and quiet conversation. The initial tension between them had softened, replaced by familiarity and an unspoken understanding. Each morning began with gathering firewood and tending the small garden he had cultivated near the cabin. She learned quickly, carrying wood, cleaning tools, and observing his methods. He watched her carefully, impressed by her skill, patience, and the care she took with every task. Her movements were deliberate, confident, yet gentle, and he realized that her strength was matched by thoughtfulness, a rare combination. When breakfast was ready, they ate together, sharing food in silence or light conversation. Sometimes they laughed over small incidents, dropping bread into the fire, spilling water, or misjudging the best way to chop wood. These moments, simple and ordinary, allowed them to see each other in a different light, not as a stranger or a visitor, but as a partner in daily life. The woman had arrived expecting only shelter for one night. Yet now, after days of shared work and quiet companionship, she hesitated at the thought of leaving. She found herself enjoying the calm of the cabin, the warmth of the fire, and the quiet presence of the man. It was not fear of the world beyond, nor a lack of desire to continue her journey. It was something subtler, a sense of belonging and comfort that she had rarely experienced.
One afternoon, she suggested they walk to the nearby stream.
The sun was high, warming the damp earth, and the forest was alive with color and sound. Birds flitted between branches, and the air carried the rich scent of soil and pine. As they walked, she noticed how familiar the paths had become under his guidance, how easily he moved through the forest, and how patiently he taught her to read signs she had previously overlooked. "You have taught me much," she said quietly, watching his steady movements. "But about patience, about paying attention to the little things." He glanced at her, a faint smile crossing his face. "The forest teaches us everything if we are willing to listen," he said. "But sometimes it is not just about survival. It is about understanding, noticing, and respecting life around us. You have learned quickly." She felt warmth at his words. It was rare to be recognized not just for skill, but for the care and thought behind actions. She had often traveled among people who judged only by appearances or strength, never seeing the quiet intelligence and respect behind them. Here, she felt seen. The stream was cool and clear, and they paused at its edge, removing their boots to let their feet feel the refreshing water. The sunlight sparkled on the surface, and for a while they simply sat in silence, listening to the gentle flow and enjoying the shared peace. The man observed her as she examined the water and surrounding plants, noting her attentiveness and the quiet joy she found in simple observations. He realized he had begun to value not only her presence but her perspective, a new way of seeing the world through careful eyes. "You could stay here," he said softly after a moment, almost as if testing the thought aloud. She looked at him, surprised by the suggestion. I do not know," she admitted. "My path is not here. I must continue my journey. Yet, it is tempting to remain, at least for a while." He nodded, understanding the conflict she felt. "It is your choice," he said simply. "You do not owe me anything, but you are welcome here for as long as you need." That evening, back at the cabin, they shared dinner and quiet conversation. The forest outside had grown still, the moon casting silver light through the trees. They spoke of small matters, plans for food, repairs to the cabin, and what the coming weeks might bring. But beneath the surface, a deeper connection had formed, unspoken yet undeniable. Over the following days, they worked together on the small tasks of daily life, and each discovered new aspects of the other. She admired his quiet strength, his deep respect for the forest, and the care he showed in even the smallest actions. He admired her courage, intelligence, and the balance she maintained between independence and humility. One afternoon, as they repaired a fence to keep animals from wandering into the cabin's garden, a moment of silence fell between them. She paused, looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and hesitation.
"I did not expect this. Well-looking past fresher."
Feeling," she said softly. "When I came here, I only asked for shelter. I never imagined I would find peace, respect, or companionship." He stopped working and met her gaze. "Nor did I," he admitted. "I have lived alone for many years, valuing solitude above all else. Yet your presence—" "But it has brought something I did not know I needed. A sense of connection, perhaps, or understanding." Her eyes softened, and for a moment neither spoke, letting the words settle between them. There was a quiet tension, not of fear, but of realization. Both were beginning to acknowledge that what had started as a chance meeting had grown into something deeper. As the day turned to evening, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. They sat near the fire, their work completed for the day. The woman prepared a simple meal while he tended the fire, and the cabin felt warm, safe, and full of quiet companionship. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "why life sometimes brings people together unexpectedly?" He considered her words. "Perhaps it is not so much chance as timing," he said. "The right people, at the right moment, meet for reasons we do not yet understand. And sometimes those meetings change the course of our lives." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She had come seeking only shelter, yet she had found guidance, safety, and a bond she did not anticipate. She realized that the man had begun to occupy a space in her thoughts that was different from any traveler she had met before. Someone whose presence she cherished, whose judgment she trusted, and whose company she enjoyed more with each passing day. That night, as they prepared to rest, the fire casting a warm glow across the cabin, the woman found herself reflecting on the past days. The forest, the storm, the challenges, they had all brought her here, to this place, and to this man. She felt a sense of gratitude, wonder, and cautious hope. She did not yet know what the future would hold, but she recognized that her heart had begun to respond in ways she had not expected. The man, too, reflected on the quiet moments they had shared. He had lived a life defined by independence, but her presence had introduced something new, a companion who challenged him, inspired him, and offered him the possibility of connection without expectation. Best, he felt a warmth he had not experienced in years, and a growing curiosity about what the days ahead might bring. The bond between them continued to grow, strengthened by shared experiences, mutual respect, and the simple act of living alongside one another. They were learning not only about survival in the forest, but about trust, understanding, and the quiet power of human connection. The woman found herself lingering longer at the cabin, helping with chores, preparing meals, and engaging in conversation. She began to feel as though the cabin and the man were becoming part of her journey rather than just a temporary stop. He noticed the change in her demeanor, the confidence, the ease, the way she laughed softly at small moments. He realized that he had come to value her presence in ways he had not anticipated, and that the connection they shared was becoming a central part of his life. One evening, as the fire crackled and the forest outside grew quiet, they sat together in companionable silence.
The woman spoke softly, almost to herself. "I did not expect to feel this way," she said.
"I thought I would only stay for a short time. Yet now I am not certain I want to leave." He looked at her, understanding the unspoken feelings behind her words. "Nor am I certain I want you to," he said quietly. "You are welcome here, for as long as you choose." The moment lingered, filled with unspoken emotions, mutual respect, and growing affection. Both understood that their bond had evolved from a simple act of shelter into something deeper, a connection built on trust, shared experiences, and a sense of understanding that transcended words. As night fell, they prepared to sleep, each feeling the warmth of the fire and the comfort of companionship. The forest outside was calm, the remnants of the storm a distant memory. Inside, the cabin was alive with quiet life, laughter, and the beginnings of something that neither had expected but both had come to cherish. The woman realized that she had begun to see the cabin, and the man, not as a temporary refuge, but as a place where she could feel safe, respected, and connected. She felt a sense of possibility, a hope that her journey might not need to continue alone. The man, in turn, felt a deepening appreciation for her presence, her intelligence, and her quiet strength. He understood that this bond, born of a single night of shelter, was becoming a meaningful part of his life, a partnership that he valued and wished to nurture. As they drifted into sleep, the fire casting a warm glow, both were aware that the days ahead would bring decisions, challenges, and choices. Bosa. Yet for now, They rested in the quiet companionship they had built, a bond of trust, respect, and slowly growing affection, ready to shape the path of their lives together. The morning sun rose gently over the forest, spilling golden light across the cabin and the dewy ground outside. Birds sang softly in the trees, and a light breeze carried the fresh scent of pine and earth. It was a peaceful morning, one that felt almost magical after the stormy days that had passed. The man and the woman moved about the cabin in quiet harmony, each performing their morning tasks with ease. The woman stirred first, gathering her small bundle of belongings and quietly preparing a simple breakfast. She looked around the cabin, noticing the firewood stacked neatly, the tools arranged carefully, and the small signs of order and care that the man had put into his home. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of permanence, an idea that perhaps, just perhaps, this could be more than a temporary stop on her journey. The man emerged from the bedroom, stretching his shoulders and glancing at her with a faint smile. You are awake early," he observed.
"I wanted to make sure everything is ready if you need to leave today," she replied softly, her words carefully measured.
She was thinking of the journey that had originally brought her here, the path she had planned to follow, and the life she had imagined for herself. But yet in that moment she also recognized the bond that had formed between them, a connection that was no longer fleeting but meaningful and real.
He nodded, sensing the careful thought behind her words.
"You do not need to rush," he said quietly. "The roads will remain for as long as you choose to stay." There was a pause, filled with unspoken feelings. Both were aware that this day might bring decisions that would change their lives forever. The woman had come, seeking only shelter for one night, expecting nothing more than safety and warmth. Instead, she had found companionship, trust, and a bond that had grown stronger with each passing day. After breakfast, they walked together outside, stepping onto the forest path that led from the cabin to the wider world. The sunlight streamed through the trees, creating patterns of gold and shadow on the ground. The woman paused, taking a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. She glanced at the man, considering the choice she faced. "I have traveled far," she began quietly, "and I had a plan, but I thought I knew the path I would follow. But now," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "Now I am not certain I want to leave. I have found something here that I did not expect, and I do not know if I am ready to give it up." He looked at her, his expression gentle, yet filled with understanding. "You are free to choose," he said. "No one can decide for you, and there is no wrong choice. But you must follow what your heart tells you." The woman considered his words carefully. She reflected on the days spent together, the stormy night that had brought her to the cabin, the tense journey through the forest, and the quiet moments of trust and companionship. She remembered the laughter, the shared work, and the sense of being seen and respected. She realized that she had begun to feel a sense of home in this place, and in the presence of the man who had welcomed her. After a long silence, she spoke again. "I think I would like to stay," she said softly. "Not because I am afraid of the world beyond, but because I have found something here that is worth more than the road. I have found a place where I belong, and a person I trust." The man's eyes softened, a smile spreading across his face. "Then you are welcome," he said quietly, meaning every word. "I would be honored to have you stay." The days that followed were filled with quiet joy and the deepening of their bond. They worked together to repair parts of the cabin, tended to the garden, and shared meals by the fire. Each small act Whether chopping wood, cooking food, or cleaning, was done in partnership, a testament to the growing understanding and respect between them. They spent long hours walking through the forest, exploring its quiet corners and learning from each other's knowledge and skills. The woman shared stories of her people, of traditions and lessons passed down through generations, and the man listened with genuine interest and admiration. In turn, he taught her the ways of the land, how to read the forest, find water, and move with care and confidence. Barant. Each lesson, each shared moment, strengthened their connection and trust. As the seasons began to change, their companionship blossomed into love. It was not sudden or dramatic, but quiet, steady, and enduring. A love built on respect, shared experience, and mutual understanding. They laughed together, supported one another through challenges, and celebrated the simple joys of daily life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest was bathed in warm golden light, the man took the woman's hand. They stood near the cabin watching the sky shift from orange to deep purple, and he spoke with a sincerity that filled her heart with warmth. "I cannot imagine my life without you," he said softly. "You have brought something into my world that I did not know was missing."
You have been my companion, my partner, and my friend. Will you marry me? The woman felt her heart swell with emotion.
She had not anticipated this moment, yet it felt natural, right, and inevitable. Thus, she looked into his eyes, seeing the honesty, respect, and love reflected there, and knew that she had found the life she wanted. A life built not on chance alone, but on trust, partnership, and shared values. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, but filled with joy. "I will marry you." The man smiled, relief and happiness shining in his eyes. He gently pulled her into an embrace, feeling the warmth of her presence, the strength of her trust, and the certainty of the bond they shared. In that moment, the cabin, the forest, and the life they had built together felt complete. The days that followed were filled with preparations for a simple ceremony, one that honored both their backgrounds and the traditions they held dear. Bess. Friends from nearby settlements and family from the woman's people came to celebrate, and the cabin was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of food cooked with care. They exchanged vows, not grand or extravagant but heartfelt, acknowledging their respect, love, and commitment to one another. Life after the wedding was a continuation of the partnership they had built. They worked together on the land, cared for the cabin, and nurtured the small community that had gathered around them. Breaths. The woman shared her knowledge of her people's traditions, and the man shared his understanding of the land and survival. Together they blended their experiences, creating a life rooted in respect, understanding, and love. Over time, the cabin became more than a home. It became a symbol of their journey, a place where trust and care had transformed a single night of shelter into a lifetime of companionship. They faced challenges together, storms, the demands of the land, and occasional hardships, but they did so with unity, knowing that their bond could withstand adversity. The woman often reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the long travels, the stormy night, and the chance encounter that had changed her life. She marveled at how a simple act of seeking shelter had led to a life filled with love, safety, and partnership. The man, too, reflected on the changes she had brought into his world. The warmth, understanding, and companionship that had transformed his life from solitude to fulfillment. Together they grew not just in love, but in wisdom, patience, and understanding. They respected each other's differences, celebrated each other's strengths, and supported one another in times of difficulty. Their days were filled with meaningful work, shared laughter, and quiet moments of reflection, and their nights were warmed by the fire and the comfort of companionship. Baskets. As the years passed, their life together became a testament to the power of trust, respect, and the unexpected ways in which life can bring people together. What had begun as a single night of shelter had evolved into a lifelong partnership, built on mutual care, understanding, and love. The forest, once a place of uncertainty and danger, had become a home, a witness to the growth of their bond and the life they built together. And though they faced the challenges of the world beyond their cabin, they faced them together, confident in the strength of the connection that had begun with a simple act of kindness. The woman, once a traveler seeking only shelter, had found a home and a partner, while the man, once a solitary figure, had found companionship, love, and a shared life he had never imagined possible. In the quiet moments, as they sat together by the fire or walked through the forest hand in hand, they often reflected on how a single night had changed everything. They knew that life's unexpected encounters could bring the greatest joys, and they cherished the bond that had grown from trust, patience, and mutual respect. Their story, though simple, was remarkable in its depth and meaning. It was a story of courage, kindness, and the power of human connection, a story of two people from different worlds finding each other and choosing to build a life together. The storm that had brought them together had passed, but its legacy remained in the love, trust, and partnership that defined their lives. And so, the Apache woman who had asked for one night of shelter became not just a visitor, but a wife, a companion, and a partner for life. The man who had opened his cabin door to a stranger found not only a companion, but a love that filled his world with warmth, meaning, and hope. Together, they faced the future, ready to share their lives in a bond that had begun with simple kindness and grown into a lifetime of love.